So Monday is the big day. Prime Minister Trudeau and President Trump are meeting in Washington, and eyes are on Trudeau to set the tone with this administration. Many are saying he isn't being tough enough. Is that the best strategy? Time for At Issue to weigh in. Chantal Hébert is in Montreal, Andrew is in Toronto, and Jennifer Ditchburn joins us tonight in Ottawa. So, Andrew, let's start with you. We've had a few hints of the relationship that Trudeau has tried to establish here on travel ban in particular. He sort of said Canada wouldn't do that, but he didn't condemn the position either. What's your opinion of how it's been handled so far publicly?
I guess I would say not so much how has Trudeau handled it, but how has the world handled it, and Trump in general. His actions on this file, travel ban and everything else, has implications for the rest of the world. It isn't just our values that are engaged here, it's also our interests. And some world leaders have condemned it, some haven't. I think that's the problem, is that people are reacting individually and not collecting collectively engaging with each other. And I think the lesson of that, and the lesson I think of Trump increasingly, is we're going to have to deal with him in a kind of collective way. If he picks us off one by one, if every country is just looking to its own interests, narrowly construed, then that's what he wants. He wants to be able to do everything bilaterally and get, escape any kind of multilateral entanglements. So I guess I would say what I would really like to see our Prime Minister doing is coordinating his response with other countries. What
are you hoping to see, Chantal, or what are you thinking you're going to see?
I don't disagree with Andrew, but I think maybe his comment is premature for two reasons. One, there's the internal U.S. dynamics dealing with the travel ban, and actually it's best for everyone to let that play itself out. It is a country that does have a rule of law, as we were reminded tonight. Two, yes, it's a good idea to reach out, but who do you reach out to with the French about to go in a presidential election, with Germany about to go into an election of its own, with Great Britain into Brexit, and with Australia having gotten off to a pretty difficult start with Trump? So yes, at some point that may be the way to deal with the Trump presidency, but I think a lot of Canadian allies are actually looking to see if maybe Justin Trudeau can develop enough of a relationship that he can convey some of that sound from the rest of the world to Trump before Trump does things.
Jennifer, what kind of role do you see for Trudeau?
Well, I'm kind of looking at it from a completely different angle. I actually think the main focus of the trip is not the travel ban at all. It's going to be on trade and the border. And so in that respect, I think we spend a lot of time worrying or talking about what Trudeau's doing, but the real work is being done by all these different people. I mean, there were 3 ministerial visits. The consuls general are involved. Mulroney went down to the States to talk on behalf of or do some connecting on behalf of the federal government. There's our very busy ambassador. So I think we see sort of like above the waterline, but below the waterline, it's a very, very aggressive campaign to make some kind of connection with this new administration and try as best as they can to avoid any kind of big trade war, border taxes, a thickening of the border. I mean, all these things are really, really serious for Canada. Not to diminish the Muslim ban, which is very serious in terms of our values, but I think the objectives of this trip are not about that ban.
But just to take the trade as an example, I think it was very unfortunate that one of the first signals that we were sending was that we were basically abandoning Mexico in the NAFTA discussions. Now, we'll see whether that proves to be the case, but certainly that was the signal that was being sent. I think there's a reason why we got into NAFTA was precisely to avoid one-on-one dealings with the Americans, that we are in a better position when we're negotiating with them with other partners. So I hope that will prove to be been a short-lived feint.
How well are we positioned, Chantal, to not get creamed?
Well, for one thing, Trudeau has managed to get through 2 phone calls, not one, with Trump, and nothing has happened, considering what happened with the French and the Australians. You count your blessings here. But I do think that all the trade stuff and the ministers being on the ground in Washington, the strategy is actually to create around Trump a kind of buzz from his own people about, let's not go there. One of the dangers that Canada is in, and I agree with Andrew, dissociating Canada from Mexico is a poor strategy. It's not going to pay off. But Canada is in a bad position in the sense that it stands to be collateral damage to a lot of moves because it is not on the radar. Canada may not be the target, but it suffers. So I do think they're trying to kind of keep Canada safe by building those relationships. That being said, in that meeting, in the best of all worlds, it would be a cordial meeting, not one that has a grocery list. I've never seen a prime minister meet a president for the first time and show up with a to-do list. So I don't think that's going to be on, but at least to build some kind of rapport that would mean that Trump might pick up the phone when Trudeau calls before he does things that Canada can't live with.
But on the other hand, Jennifer, there was a poll out this week suggesting that Canadians want the Prime Minister to be a lot tougher in terms of defending Canadian principles. Like, how do you find that line? Jennifer?
Well, I mean, it's very difficult. Obviously, I'm sure that the Trudeau team is sort of dreading this whole event because of that line he has to walk. So, I mean, he's not going to want to look too smiley or too cozy with Trump. But at the same time, he has to, as Chantal said, build a rapport. I mean, I actually don't think it would have been all that easy for Stephen Harper either. It wasn't easy for Stephen Harper when he met George Bush for the first time. When you have a leader that Canadians really dislike, it's very difficult. But I think that if I'm reading into it properly, I think they see sort of the bigger long-term picture, which is, yes, we can stand for Canadian values and speak out in favor of what our values are as a people. But at the same time, we have to look at all those thousands of Canadian jobs that are tied up with the United States. And so poking the bear in public is probably not the greatest strategy.
But Andrew, what happens in private? I mean, these are two very different personalities with very different mandates.
I think different personalities doesn't even begin to describe it. We are dealing here with, in Trump, with, frankly, a damaged individual. He is not operating on the same wavelength as any previous president, and I would dare say as most people. He does not value the same things that presidents we have ever known do. He does not see trade, for example, as win-win. He sees it as win-lose. He sees most human relations that way, in terms of either you dominate or you are dominated. It's going to be extremely difficult, I think, for Justin Trudeau dealing with him, just because, or for any Canadian Prime Minister, because he's such a mercurial, such an unpredictable personality. You don't know what will set him off. Obviously, the goal will be to try to put things on a business-like footing, where we have our differences in policies, but we can work together. But I imagine the Prime Minister of Australia wanted to put things on a business-like footing, and we saw how that turned out.
Yeah, that conversation went off the rails, Chantal.
But this is also, from what we see here, someone who needs a win and who likes to be liked, and that's the one thing that Justin Trudeau has that Trump might find interesting. That Trump works the celebrity circuit, and strangely enough, the Canadian Prime Minister is the biggest celebrity on that circuit at this point. So there might be a place for that, or the opposite. This guy from Canada is overshadowing my glory. But he does need to be validated in who he is. And Justin Trudeau has a quality that Stephen Harper would have had trouble with if he'd been in that room. And he doesn't need to show that he's the smarter person in the room. That's going to be really important in the case of this meeting.
Well, and I think, just to add to what Chantal's saying, I think that one thing about Justin Trudeau that's sort of underestimated is his emotional intelligence, or his EQ, and I think that will probably be, if there is any opportunity, because sometimes these meetings and the two rooms are like two rows of people, and it's really cold to begin with. But if there's some meeting behind closed doors where there's like a one-on-one, then I think there's something there that, as Chantal pointed out, maybe Stephen Harper wasn't as good as Justin Trudeau would be in this case.
Well, Andrew, you've probably been around the longest. Maybe not, Chantal?
Sadly, I think that's my privilege.
So are you getting flashbacks of previous sort of gnarly relationships? Is there any one that has ever been anything like this?
Are you getting flashbacks to any past presidents when you watch Trump over his first 20 days? I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, they're always there to defend American interests, and that's always going to be, raise particular flashpoints with Canada. They typically tend to be type A personalities, so there's always going to be some friction. This is of an entirely different order. We've never seen any president like this, and therefore we're never going to see, I hope, any kind of relationship like this.
So Jennifer, Chantal was saying that you don't go into these things with a grocery list. But are you
I do.
expecting that there will be an announcement on NAFTA or a calming message, or what's going to? Chantal's shaking her head. Jennifer, what are you expecting?
Well, I did hear today that there will probably be some sort of a deliverable after this meeting, and that the Canadian government was really hoping to go with something concrete. So even the smallest little thing that they could say, as often happens at these kind of meetings, like we signed a memorandum of agreement on X, Y, or Z, just to have something. And you know, it's notable too that, you know, they're not meeting at Mar-a-Lago like Trump is apparently going to meet with the Japanese president, or might have already. So I think the whole setting is a business setting, and it's a very sort of maybe as anodyne as possible, I guess. I could actually see there being some sort of win for Trump. It's something that they could say, hey, here's something that's good for the two countries.
But no.
Yeah, well, I can't remember that we expected a win when Trudeau met Obama, and they got along great, but the softwood lumber file did not get resolved.
Not a win
Yes,
for us.
I have seen a lot of those meetings, but this is the first time that I see it set up as a meeting that should produce a win from an administration that is just incoming.
So if you can't get that with the bromance between Obama and Trudeau, Andrew?
Well, as Alan Gottlieb taught us, you know, the president to prime minister relations are important, but they're not by any means the be-all and the end-all. It's very much important, and I think especially important in this White House, congressional relations. There's so many different power centers in the United States, thank heavens. Even within his cabinet, I think what we're seeing already in the first couple of weeks is enormous divisions within that cabinet. People going into their confirmation hearings and saying the exact opposite of the president's doctrine on some fairly major issues like relations with Russia. And unless we see exactly who Trump listens to and who has his ear, and I think it's probably important to be cultivating all these different power sources.
Well,
Yeah,
we'll all be
thank
watching Monday. Thanks so much, the three of you. Thanks.
Thank you.